Hillel says, she's beautiful. She's somebody worth praising. Shammai says, but you're lying. Hillel says, I'm not lying. I just see things differently than you. You're going by what's in front of you. But there's always goodness, and I'm going to try to see it. Okay, friends, the story begins. The Talmud talks about the ethics of how to praise a bride, which is an interesting thing, because why would you praise a bride that's not yours? But there is a concept of praising the bride. Take a look at the text on the bottom of 16b. I'm going to try something new. You guys know me and my English reading skills. I'm going to read it in Hebrew and translate it. And you're welcome to follow along with me in the Hebrew or the English. But Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis had taught, Ketzad meraktim lifnei hakala. How do we dance in front of the bride? There's a mitzvah to bring joy to the bride and groom on the night of their wedding, and that's through dancing. And I think, by the way, this is worth mentioning. One of the notable differences of a traditional Jewish wedding and perhaps a wedding in the world outside of Judaism is the dancing. In a traditional Jewish wedding, the dancing centers around the bride and groom. You're dancing for them to make them happy. Whereas I've seen other weddings where there's a bride and a groom and they're dancing and I'm dancing and you're dancing and we're all dancing and we're all just having a good old time at this nice party. But you wouldn't notice it's a wedding where you'd walk in the middle and not realize what the event was, because everybody's dancing because they want to have a good time. But in Judaism, it's very center focused, and it's focused on bringing joy to the bride and the groom. And the Talmud says, how do you dance in front of them? Now, as Rashi tells us, it doesn't mean dancing in the literal sense. You are supposed to dance literally, but that's not what the Talmud is getting to right now. It actually means praising. Now, why it uses the expression of dancing when it means to praise, we'll get to that soon. But how do you do this? So we have two opinions. We have the opinion of Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai Oimrim. Beis Shammai says, let's go to the next page, the top of the page. The way you praise her, kala kemos shehi. The bride, say it like she is. Say it as it is. She is literally translate. How do they translate it here in the English? The bride as she is. Say her as she is. If she's great, say she's great. If she's beautiful, say she's beautiful. If now, what if you don't have that opinion of her? Okay, right? Now you're stuck. But Shammai, we understand Shammai and the school of Shammai, how they run. We know through learning Shammai and Hillel's discussions, Shammai is usually the more no monkey business type person, right? Which is reflected throughout many stories in the Talmud and many of his quotes throughout the Talmud. But this is what he says. Beis Hillel Oimrim, Beis Hillel says, the school of Hillel says, Kale na'eh v'chasuda. The bride is pleasant and kind or beautiful or fine, different ways of translating. So Shammai says, Kala kamois shihi, say it like it is. Hillel says, no, talk about her fine qualities. Both of these statements seemingly are problematic. Amr lahen beis Shammai lebeis Hillel. The school of Shammai says to the school of Hillel, Hare shahaisa chigeris. What if she was lame, right? Not ambulatory. Oisoima. What if she was blind? Are you gonna, or what if she had some sort of quality that was not something she was necessarily proud of? Are you going to say this is a nice, fine bride? Are you going to say that? The Torah says, distance yourself from the words of falsehood, from lies. That's a good point, right? That's Shammai says, be honest, because you got to be honest. You got to praise people. That's a nice thing. It's a nice to give people praise, but it has to be done with honesty. Amr lahem Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel responds to Beis Shammai. Lidivrechem, according to your words, Mishalakach mikach ra min hashuk. Yishabchenu be'enav or yiganenu be'enav. Somebody who buys something from the marketplace. Do you praise them? That was a good find. Or do you say, what'd you do that for? Would you do that? You're not going to be nice to people? Have you praise? From here, the sages teach a person's mind should be they translate it as empathetic. You see the word empathetic there? Empathetic with mankind. That's not what it means literally, but empathetic it works. Me'ureves, if you look at the word in the Hebrew, me'ureves means, for lack of better terms, but assimilated. Your mind should be assimilated with other people. Should help me out here, guys. Should jive with other people. What's the word? Is that the right word? Okay, you get what I'm saying. Get along with other people. Your mind, you should be on the same page as other people. Get along with people. That's essentially what it's trying to say. Now, I want to take a step back here. The concept of praising somebody's bride in front of them, like, why would you do that? This isn't really practiced today, right? It doesn't always, might not even be appropriate, but it's interesting to note, and this was especially the case in 2,000 years ago. What was courtship like? What was dating like? How well do they know each other before the wedding? You have an obligation to not have an arranged marriage. Actually, arranged marriages are not a Jewish thing. You have an obligation to pick your wife and to choose her and to be okay with marrying her. But how long do you think they were dating for back then? Probably not that long, right? It's interesting. The divorce rate wasn't that high back then either, probably. But I don't know. I feel like maybe people were more simple back then. Maybe the expectations were different. But the point is, you want to make the groom feel good. You want to make him feel good for what he has entered into, for this new life phase that he's entered into. Now, how you make him feel good? Do you make him feel good with compliments? That's Hillel's view. Compliment him. Now, what if it's not true? We'll make it true. Doesn't mean to lie, but find something good. I'm sure you can find, that's how commentaries understand it. Find something good about her and say it. Shammai says you don't need a compliment. You need to say she's perfect for you, the way she is. That's how it says in Hebrew. Kamos shehi, the way she is. She's perfect for you. What do I care if she's what do I care about her exemplimentary qualities? That's not my business. She's good enough for you, and that's good. That's how commentaries kind of understand this piece of Talmud. Side note, this can almost be parenthetical, but I think it's worth mentioning. Going back to the bottom line of that paragraph, where it says we derive from here, from Hillel, that a person's disposition should always be empathetic with mankind. That's not the exact translation. It says the second to last line and the last line. La'olam tehei da'ato shel adam. Da'ato. What's da'ato? From the word da'at. The mind of a person should be empathetic with other people. It doesn't say you should be empathetic with people. It says your mind should be empathetic with people. So there was a famous Sephardic sage. His name was the Chida, which is an acronym for Chaim, Yosef, David, Azulai. One of the famous commentators in halacha and many areas of Jewish works. And he says the reason why it says the mind has to be empathetic is because you can't just fake the empathy on the outside. You have to actually believe it. When you are giving a compliment, make sure you believe that compliment. When you're following Hillel's path, and by the way, the halacha does follow Hillel in this case, Beis Hillel, not Beis Shammai. When you're following Hillel's path of complimenting her, make sure it's a legitimate compliment in your mind, not just a verbal compliment, a political PC type thing, like a politician. Be real, be legit. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Otherwise, this is going to backfire. The commentaries take this obscure story of how to praise a bride and unpack incredible relevance to everybody. Tonight, every single one of us watching this is not at a wedding. Otherwise, you should shut this off right now and be at the wedding. Right? So we're not at a wedding right now. We're listening to and partaking in a Torah class. So how is this relevant to me? I don't plan on going up to my friend's bride or up to my friend and say, good pick, man. But there is some sort of deeper relevance. And as we had discussed earlier, the Talmud has halachic practical significance. But very often, the Talmud and the sages of the Talmud are conveying deeper messages using mundane lingo. And this is no exception. And what I like to do is share two different interpretations, alternative interpretations that are not literal, of what this section of Talmud could actually mean praising a bride. What is a bride? A bride is a euphemism in Jewish mysticism. What is a bride a euphemism for? I'll give you a hint. Think of Shabbos. Think of Friday night services. Think of the Lechadodi. Lechadodi likrat kala, come my beloved. Queen. Let's greet the bride, the queen, right? The face of Shabbat, Pnei Shabbat, the Kabbalah. Come greet the bride. We're going to receive the face of Shabbat. Shabbat is euphemistically referred to as a bride. A bride in Jewish mysticism is God's divine presence. That's what a bride is. And how do you dance in front of the bride? Go back for a second to 16b on the bottom of the page, because I want you to see the Hebrew word for a second. Ketzad merakdin. How do we meraked? How do we meraked? You know what meraked means? It means a few things. It means to dance. It has another meaning. It can mean to refine, to almost to sift. It's a variation on when you're sifting flour. One of the things that's prohibited on Shabbos. It's called meraktin. You're sifting. It means to sift. And where are you sifting? Before the bride. The bride has not yet come. God's presence has not yet manifested this world in a palpable, perceptual way, in a meaningful way. God is present in a way that we can believe that he's here, even though we don't experience him fully. But until Mashiach comes, and while we're in exile, God has not fully manifested this world. The bride, the divine presence, has not fully integrated with this world in a perfect, meaningful way. So before that happens, before Mashiach comes, how are we going to refine the world? Ketzad meraktin. How are we going to refine this world? How are we going to fulfill our mission, our purpose? Lifnei hakala, prior to the bride coming, prior to God manifesting this world. The Baal Shem Tov had a student. His name was, I just looked up his name. He wrote a book called Tafnas Paneach, which means the opening up the hiding space, the opening up that which is hidden. This is the name of his book. The author's name was Yaakov Yosef of Palon. He was a Kabbalist, and later in life, he had discovered the Baal Shem Tov in his teachings and became part of the Hasidic community. And apparently, much of the teachings that we know from the Baal Shem Tov come from him, because the Baal Shem Tov taught a lot of Torah, and Hasidus, the perspective of Hasidus, obviously comes from the Baal Shem Tov, but a lot of it came through him because the Baal Shem Tov didn't actually write anything down. So he had written down a lot of the teachings. A lot of the teachings we have come from him. And this is how he understands the Gemara based on the Talmud, based on the Baal Shem Tov's teachings. Ketzad meraktim, how do we refine this world? Lifnei hakala, prior to the divine presence being here. In other words, while we're in Galus and we seem exiled from the divine presence. You know what the answer is? Well, there's two answers. There's Beis Shammai's answer and there's Beis Hillel's answer. Beis Shammai says, Kala, the bride, the divine presence, Kamois Shihi. It is what it is. You got to deal with the situation. You got to work with what God gave you. How am I going to survive exile? How am I going to bring light into a world that seems so fragmented and dark and corrupt and confused? How am I going to allow the oneness of God to be expressed in the most mundane parts of my life? Do what I can. That's the exile mindset that Beis Shammai has. You do what you can, right? Kala kamoishihi. This is just the way it is. You have to have a certain level of acceptance. What's the serenity prayer? It's been a while. No, I'm kidding. But the serenity prayer is something to the effect of, give me the strength to change the things that I can and the knowledge or wisdom to accept what I can't. There's certain things we have to accept. And by the way, the Tanya does take that perspective to a degree. When you study chapter 27 of Tanya, where he discusses the person who's feeling a deep sense of shame because of the emotions that they're experiencing that they're less than proud of, the lusts they're experiencing that they're less than proud of, the thoughts that's swarming their brain that they're less than proud of. And the Beinoni or aspiring Beinoni says, I feel ashamed of myself. And the Alter Rebbe says, I have a solution. Embrace it. Embrace the limitations that God had given you. And maybe your job is not to become perfectly inside. Maybe your job is to work on your behavior, not on your internal self. Focus on what you can change and not get bogged down by what you can't. This is what Shammai says. Kala, the bride, Kemos Shehi, it's just the way she is. Just the way it is. This is the way it is. What does Beis Hillel says, the school of Hillel? Kala, the bride, No'eh v'chasuda, beautiful and fine and fair, pleasant. Beis Hillel says, if you want to refine the world, even though the divine presence isn't here palpably, you have to learn about how beautiful that divine presence is. The Kala, the divine presence of God, even if we don't experience it yet, we have to believe that it's a beautiful thing. We have to believe that we have to actually want it. How are we going to bring God's presence down in this world when he seems so far from this world? I mean, first of all, we have to know that it's not that far. The world is not that far from experiencing the light of God, from bringing Mashiach in this world, from integrating the oneness and truth of God in this world, even though it seems very corrupt. We'd probably believe it a lot more if we shut off the news, right? But the answer is, we watch less media, less time on social media, and more time in the books. Learn about the beauty of God. The Kala, the divine presence of God, is beautiful, is fine, is pleasant, is something that we're attracted to, is something we're excited about. And when we have that mindset, even though the divine presence isn't here in a way that we can meaningfully experience it, because there is no Beis HaMikdash yet, there is no, the Messianic era has not yet arrived. That era in time where Isaiah describes the world be filled with the knowledge of God has not yet arrived. But just envision how beautiful it would be. Think about it this way. What if the divine presence was here in this world? What if Mashiach came? What if the world was filled with the knowledge of God and that God's divine presence, the Kala, was meaningfully integrated in every part of my life? Every part of my life reflected that. Let's say I was living in line with that, like a tzaddik almost. Think about that and ask yourself, what is the first thing you would notice about yourself? What difference would that make in your life? This is the question you have to answer for yourself. What would I do differently? How would my davening be different? How would my motivation to do mitzvahs be different? How would my capacity to give charity, my motivation to give charity be different? And that might be a meaningful change, a manageable change we could actually implement. Because the Kala, the divine presence, is beautiful. This is Hillel's perspective. Okay, he's not here yet, but still a beautiful thing. And it's going to be here. So what difference will that make in my life? If it was here, let's start living like that now. Let's start living with the Mashiach lenses now. This is Hillel's perspective. When the Shulchan Aruch cites this section in Talmud, it doesn't even cite Shammai's opinion. It cites Hillel's opinion. Just saying. Because generally, the halacha follows Hillel. Okay. This is the viewpoint, the vantage point of the Baal Shem Tov. This is how the Baal Shem Tov interpreted this based on the teachings of the Tzafnas Paneach by Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Poler. I want to share with you a different way of interpreting this section of the Talmud based on the Rebbe's teachings. The Rebbe points out something fascinating, and not very many people can do this. But the Rebbe, in this very long teaching of his, takes many diverse samples throughout the Talmud where you see a reoccurring theme in the motivation behind the arguments of Shammai and Hillel. So whenever they have differing opinions, it's not just arbitrary, but there is a philosophy. And that philosophy is reflected in diverse arguments that they're having. And here's the general philosophy. I'm going to present you the general philosophy, philosophical difference between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. I'll give you some examples throughout different sections in the Talmud. And we'll show you how that informs the way we view the debate over here and how that changes the way we see people. You with me? You ready? This is going to be a bit of a journey, but it'll be fun. Okay, l'chaim. Okay. The general difference between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And again, we know the general, super general difference. Shammai is the no messing around kind of guy, right? Says it like it is. The Kala the way she is, and Beis Hillel is the nice guy. The general rule is Shammai looks at the big picture. What you first see at first glance, that's the big picture, right? When you meet a person, you first see their whole selves, but you don't know them in detail. Then you have a conversation with them, and you see people are not that simple. It's not just what they had presented to me, but there's many multiple pieces and parts that make us up. Right? Shammai is looking at the first glance, who you are as a whole. Hillel is looking at the details. So I'll give you an example from Tractate Brachos. One of the blessings we recite Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos, when we're making Havdalah, we make the bracha on the candle. We thank God and praise God for the creation of fire. And the blessing we say is Boirei Ma'oirei Ha'esh. We praise He who creates the lights of fire. The lights of fire, plural. The truth is, it's not so clear what the blessing should be. That is the opinion of Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says, and we follow Hillel, right? So that's what's going to appear in the Siddur. Beis Hillel says, the blessing that we recite is He who creates the lights of fire. But if you look in the Talmud there, Shammai has a differing opinion. He who created, singular, the light, singular, of fire. He says it's in the singular, not the plural. There's a debate. What's the reason? It goes back to this principle. Shammai says there's only one color in this fire. It's orange. It's one flame. Hillel says, look at it closely, man. There's multiple colors. You're looking at from far away, an aerial view. You see this blaze of red or orange, whatever it is. Look closely. There's red, there's orange, there's blue, there's white. There's diverse colors mixed in. This isn't fire. This is fires. See the difference? This is the difference between Shammai and Hillel. Shammai is looking at the bigger picture from an aerial view. Hillel is looking at the details. I'll give you another example from Tractate Shabbos. This is a more well-known example. There's the story where the convert came and he wanted to convert. He says to Shammai, tell me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one foot and I'll convert. Shammai chases him out. He then goes to Hillel, tell me the whole Torah while standing on one foot. And Hillel answers him, what is hateful to you, don't do to others. The rest is commentary, go learn, and the guy ends up converting. Again, there's this same philosophy. Shammai says, you want the whole Torah on one foot, and not going to happen. You can't have conditions for your conversion. You can't convert if you're interested in this Judaism thing, come to me, ask your questions, and you'll convert. If you're not interested, nobody's forcing you to convert, right? You can't have conditions for conversion. Hillel says, conditions? This isn't conditions. Let's get in the details here. This guy wants to know. He's interested, right? He realizes how complicated the person is, that there's something else prompting him to ask this question, and that there's more parts of a person. Hillel's looking at the details of the individual. It's not a condition. He wants to know because he's burning to understand what Judaism really is, what the essence is. Hillel's looking at the depth, not just at the bigger picture from an aerial view. Another example from Tractate Chulin. Tractate Chulin is one of the tractates where a lot of the laws of kosher are discussed. In Tractate Chulin, one of the things that it discusses is the law of not putting chicken, or not, let's say not eating chicken and milk together, right? From a biblical perspective, you can't have beef or meat and milk together. Rabbinically, you can't have chicken and milk together. Okay. Now, how far do we go with this rabbinic precaution? What if you're eating a piece of cheese at the table? I'm eating chicken, and I want to sit at the table with you. I want to sit at the same table. I want to eat. We're not going to share food. We're not going to. Is that permitted or no? I'm not eating them together. So Shammai says, or Beis Shammai says, go for it. What's the problem? You're not mixing the two. There's no problem. Look right now, no problem. Hillel says, hold on. Let's start asking questions. Me and you are buddies. We're good friends. We're going to get carried away in conversation, and we might actually end up sharing with each other. Let me try some of that. Like, don't put it at the same table. Don't do it. Shammai is looking here and now at what you see in the situation as I see it at this moment. It's permitted. Hillel is looking at what might happen. He's looking at the details. He's tearing things apart. Again, it's that same theme. Shammai's looking at the body, just this is what's in front of my eyes. Hillel's looking at the potential, or not just the potential, but at the details of and prying deeper. Going back to our section in Talmud over here, Shammai says, the bride, say it like it is. Say what you see. The way she is, that's what you're going to say. The way she is, that's what you're going to say, because that's what you see in front of you. And that's how we look at life. We look at life based on what our eyes tell us. Hillel says, no. She's beautiful. She's fine. She's somebody worth praising. Shammai says, but you're lying. Hillel says, I'm not lying. I just see things differently than you. You're going by your eyes. You're going by what's in front of you. But there's always goodness. And I'm going to try to see it. I'm going to try to see it. It's similar to what the Tafnas Paneach says. The divine presence, I'm going to try to see it. I'm going to try to recognize how beautiful it is. The concept of Kala, of a bride, is also euphemistic of the Jewish people. King Solomon wrote an entire book called Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, where he describes God as the groom, the Jewish people as the bride, and he describes this beautiful love affair, this beautiful relationship that we have with God. So bride could be euphemistic for Jewish people. And the difference between Shammai and Hillel in how we view the bride might be the difference in how we're supposed to view Jewish people. Sometimes we look at what we see. And if we were living in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, maybe we should follow Shammai because the site was quite beautiful. Jews are engaged, Jews are inspired, Jews are going up for the pilgrimage, and everybody's living in Israel together. And it's really a beautiful time of peace, especially during the first time of the first Beis Hamikdash in the times of King Solomon. But now that we're in exile, we adopt Hillel's view because the halacha follows Hillel. In Shulchan Aruch, it says to follow Hillel's view. And what's Hillel's view? You're incredible. You're beautiful. You do mitzvahs. Every Jew is full of mitzvahs. What do you mean? You also sin. Why do I have to look at that? Why would I look at that? There's other things to look at. There's incredible beauty. Sometimes it's hidden, but it's there. It really is. And if we're going to look for it and expect it, we are going to find it. I want to conclude with a story. Some of you heard me say this story a couple of nights ago. But as you may know, there was a big debate between Sigmund Freud and Viktor Frankl. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychology. Sigmund Freud was the father of psychology. Viktor Frankl was the father of logotherapy. He was a psychotherapist. He was a Holocaust survivor. And he had a very different view than Freud. Freud believed that people are inherently bad. People are inherently selfish. That is the motivation for people. Pleasure, self-centeredness, the ego. Life is about preserving that so you don't crash. You got to preserve that. That was the motivation behind people. This is what Freud believed. Viktor Frankl believed that what motivated people was meaning. That's what pushed people. And if what's actually going to trigger somebody to change is not their ego, or not exclusively their ego, but something more meaningful and eternal than that. And the Rebbe was a big proponent and supporter of Viktor Frankl. To the point, by the way, that Viktor Frankl he fell into deep depression because he spent his whole life trying to teach these ideas, and they were not taken. He was not accepted at the beginning in the psychologists community. He was not at all accepted. They did not want to buy that. It's bad for business because you could help people much quicker, and then you can't charge us. No, I'm just kidding. But he was not accepted, and he fell into depression. And the Rebbe had encouraged him, sent somebody to Vienna to actually encourage him. And you can look this up on YouTube on Jewish Educational Media and hear the whole story. But my point in sharing this is there was the professor of the University of Psychology from the University of Minnesota. He was a Jewish guy. He came to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he says, "I understand that you're a big supporter of Viktor Frankl's modality of focusing on what motivates people as their meaning in life. To me, as a professor of psychology and of somebody who sees clients, I don't know what to tell you. I see people and they look nice on the outside, but Freud kind of makes sense to me. I see people's selfish motives. I see people trying to preserve their ego and trying to preserve what's pleasurable to them. I see it. I just don't see how Viktor Frankl could be correct, how people are motivated by meaning when I see that they're motivated by selfishness." He says, all I do is dig into people and I just see that it's, the Rebbe told him that you might have a beautiful city with beautiful architecture, beautiful landscaping. And if you were to dig up that city, you're right, you'd see dirt. But if you don't stop digging, you keep digging, you keep prying deeper and deeper and deeper, eventually you're going to see beauty. You're going to see value. You're going to hit well springs of gushing water, an invaluable resource. Don't stop digging. This is what Hillel says. Hillel says, let's not go by what we see. Let's go by what is. Okay, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.